Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stories That Work. I'm Deacon Adam, and today I've got someone with me who refuses to sing. I asked you to sing, and you said no. Drew, I'm glad you're on here today.
I need a little bribery. That's really what I mean by that. I just need. There's got to be something in it for me.
So, reminder real quick before we get into today's topic that we have the Digital Evangelism Conference coming up on October 19th. That's a Saturday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. There's 8 topics that we're going to cover. This is a speed conference. If you're not familiar with a virtual speed conference, what we do is we cover the topics rapidly. 15-minute presentation, 10-minute Q&A, 5-minute break, and then we go on to the next speaker. Each speaker is bringing a PDF download. And the good news is, because this is not Hollywood, each speaker is accessible. So the reason we did the speed conference is if you want more information, you want some help, you can reach out to that person, that presenter, and they'll help you through this. This is not Hollywood where you can't get access to the famous person. So we're very thankful to those speakers that have all volunteered their time. Each one of them has a lot of experience in the topic they're presenting. And that's all I want to say about that. If you want more information, go to orthodoxevangelism.com. That's www.orthodoxevangelism.com. Today's guest is Drew Garrison. I think we met in 2015 at Camp St. Thecla.
That's right.
If I remember correctly. And we, if you've followed any of my work, I interviewed you for my podcast that I was doing back then, Go Forth. And
do you remember that? Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about that. So now everybody knows what you look like. Anybody heard that interview? And the reason
I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't know.
But that was really cool. We ended that episode with you and your boys. I think you had the oldest boys cabin.
I did. Yeah, I did. So that was my first year at camp, actually. And it felt like an honor at the time, but then I realized it was just okay. We're gonna prank this guy and give him the oldest boy his first time on staff.
And then tell us about the song. I don't know where you got the idea or how that came about with a lot of people probably haven't heard that episode. So tell us about the song that you won't sing today.
Gotcha. Okay. So if anybody wants to look it up, it's called, I think the official title is it's The Misty Mountains Call or something like that.
Yeah.
It's from The Hobbit. I'm sure that a lot of you guys are familiar with that. We do this thing at camp where if you have both of your elbows on the table, it's kind of, I don't know, it's a game, but also a comical attempt at teaching manners, I guess. But really, it's more just kind of a game at this point, and an opportunity to call people out. So if you see somebody at the table with both of their elbows on the table, then you can call them out by saying, "Get your elbows off the table," name, right? And everybody starts singing. And we say at the end, "We want a song now. We want a song now." And so you have to stand up and sing a song if you're caught with your elbows on the table. So there's a lot of motivation to be cautious about that because very few people want to do that. But my oldest boys had the idea that year of actually kind of staging that. And so they all, we planned it, we rehearsed, we decided what song we were going to sing, and we settled on that song. A lot of the guys in the oldest cabin, surprisingly, had very deep voices, and so it really worked out well. We chose that song, and we put our elbows on the table, and somebody called us out, and we got up in front of everyone and sang that song, and what can I say? We did a good job. So
yeah, it was good. So I have a feeling that the work that you did at camp there under Father Phil Rogers, who's the pastor of St. John in Memphis,
right,
probably played a part in you having your current position, which is what today's episode is about. So today's episode is about paid youth workers, and you're in a long line of paid youth workers at St. John's in Memphis, Tennessee. So why don't you talk a little bit about what that means? What does it mean to be a paid youth worker?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so for me, you're exactly correct. So my relationship with Father Phil was something that developed over a few years, of being at camp, and I'm very thankful for that because I really would not be here if it weren't for that. Here in Memphis specifically. So it's been a great experience. I think absolutely it's been a big learning curve for me. Even though I've had, a very limited experience in ministry in the past, I think jumping into a full-time position, a paid position, is definitely a big learning curve. Um, but it's been incredible. It's been a really great experience. So my job description essentially is primarily as the youth director, right? So the youth are my primary focus, and we have uh, on paper we have about 18 teenagers here at the parish who are members, and during events and meetings and things like that, we'll have anywhere from 5 to 12 regulars show up. So those guys are my primary focus, and then on top of that, we have our college ministry. So I essentially help lead the college ministry, the OCF chapter that's down at Ole Miss. Um, I actually go down there once a week on Thursdays, and tonight we're planning on having a meeting, so I'll be headed down there around 4 o'clock. So that's another part of it, helping lead college ministry. The third part is being involved in our young adult ministry. So we're actually a Telos sponsored parish. I'm not sure if many people are familiar with the Telos ministry, but essentially we've been given a small grant on an annual basis that we can use to plan and develop a young adult ministry with. So I'm on the leadership team with that as well, which is not necessarily specific to youth directing, but I guess as a part of my job description, that's an important part. Yeah, and then really aside from that, anything that Father Phil needs, running errands, setting this up, cleaning that, whatever, yeah. So
Would you say that your time is split evenly between the teens and young adults in college, or does one of them take up more time?
definitely the teens take up by far the majority of that time. So I think for us, yeah. So our college ministry really is on a weekly basis. It's about once a week that I'm able to go down and be with the college students. We've had an idea of building a college ministry here in the Memphis area because there unfortunately isn't an OCF chapter here. That's been a little difficult just because, I mean, there are so few Orthodox students in the first place, and even fewer who, unfortunately might be interested in starting something regular like that. But we're continuing to try and find ways to advertise ourselves and see if we could build that up. So that's taken a little bit of time, but definitely the youth is the primary focus. Um, I think we try to schedule at least 2 or 3 bigger events. When I say bigger, like a Friday night bowling, or an outing to a movie or something like that. Um, it could be anywhere from that to something as big as the third week in October we're going on a camping trip, right? And so during their fall break we're actually going out to the Shelby Forest, and we're going to spend a few days out there, and um, yeah, so we're excited about that. But anyway, so we try to have regular events for the teens, regular opportunities for them to get together and commune together and just enjoy each other's company. And then on top of that, every Tuesday evening is our teaching night. So that's for all age groups. We have the adults in a class with Father Phil. We have our children in atrium with various teachers. We have the teens with me, and we all try to stay on topic. So we have topics that we're essentially sharing, and so everybody's kind of teaching a variation of the same topic, which is really nice. And so we do that every Tuesday night with dinner. So on average, I think I see my teens at least twice a week, which is really, really nice. So anyway, yeah.
Can you tell me anything about how St. John got to the point of having a paid youth worker. It's a growing segment of Orthodox churches. Fortunately, I'm a big fan of it. I want to give a little quick background here about why I care about this so much. You may be familiar with, if you're watching, Father Evan Armitage, who he's in Loveland, Colorado. He started St. Spiridon's almost from scratch, basically. I mean, I think there was a small group there. And I heard him in a recording once say that when the church started growing and they could afford a secretary, they wanted to hire a secretary for Father Evan. And Father Evan said, no, get me a cell phone. We'll figure out the bulletin. The first and most important paid position is the youth worker. He said, that's where we put our effort, our resources, our money. And from what I can see, and I've talked with him about that since then. I reached out to him because I was so impressed. I'd never heard anyone talk about youth ministry that way, how important it was. I've just, paid attention to, the culture of youth ministry, the ebb and flow of it. And so it was exciting when I heard that you were working over in Memphis full time. So can you share anything about why St. John, or how did they come about to understand that this was an important part for their parish, that they needed to do this? Because you're, I don't know, the 10th person to have to be a paid youth director at this. Like, this is, from time to time somebody moves on and they're like, okay, we got to hire a new one. We got to keep this position filled.
Sure. To be totally honest, I'm not super familiar with the history of the youth director as a paid position here at this parish in particular. But I can probably take a good guess at why that was made such a priority for St. John throughout the years, and I can also tell you why I think it's important personally. So I think that when this parish was established, I'm assuming that from the get-go it was kind of a priority that every age group would be ministered to. And I think throughout the years, from my understanding, that St. John, thank God, has done a really good job of that. I think making youth ministry a priority is a huge part of that. And I think it's obvious why. From my perspective, youth ministry is absolutely vital. Not just because it sounds typical, not just because the teens are the future of the church, but also because they're the now of the church. They're the life of the church. They're the present. They are necessary for the church community now, right? And they need to be ministered to. And so I really think, for me, the statistics, I'm sure most people are familiar with statistics that have come out throughout the years. The Assembly of Bishops have put out, a few statistics themselves, but studies on Orthodox young people in particular are unfortunately alarming. And I think specifically what I mean by that is that there's something like 60% now of young people, specifically teenagers, when they go off to college. I think the number is about 60%. It might be even more than that, or it might have been more than that in the past. When they go off to college, they're not involved in church anymore. They're not involved in their local parish. They don't have a connection to Christ's body. They don't have a connection to that ecclesial community anymore. Other than maybe nominally, right? Or even ethnically. And then, that 60%, I think of that 60%, maybe 5% or something like that. I might be butchering the statistics, but it's something around there. It's a low number regardless. Don't come back to church unless maybe they have, children in the future and they want their children to get baptized and these kinds of things. And I think for me, my thought process is that there are a few reasons why that is the case. One is because, unfortunately, I think a lot of teenagers don't feel like they really truly have community in their parishes. And that's kind of a heavy thing. And forgive me, I don't want to make assumptions about anybody's parishes, but in my experience, and teenagers that I've spoken to, all over the place in different jurisdictions, whatever, in different faith traditions even, right? So one of their biggest things is that they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like there's much they don't feel a part of that community, right? And that might very well be because they don't have the attention that they really need uh, to 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 continue to grow spiritually. And I think our lives as Christians is very much communal. It has to be, right? And so at all levels, at all ages, right? I mean, the body of Christ is a communal thing, right? The ecclesial body is very much communal. We have to be a part of this community. Christianity is not something that outside of, to small degrees, hermits or things like these, it's not something that's lived in isolation. So we need other people. We need other people around us. We need relationships, and those relationships need to be loving relationships. Um, and so I see, a youth director position for me um, is kind of threefold. So for me, primarily, it's developing an environment in which teenagers can feel like they are a part of the larger church community, right? So it's kind of a micro community within the larger church community. So a community that they can exist in with one another and offer themselves in love to one another in their relationships with one another, right? Um, and that really just looks like having fun together. Being able to spend time together, experiencing things together, having conversations together, developing those relationships, and right, having those opportunities, and a natural result of that is a development of intimacy, I think. Um, and so that's a huge motivation for me, and that's a huge reason for this particular kind of ministry. And then, secondly, I do think that religious education is important. Um, I don't think, uh, my goal is not to make our teenagers theologians, but I would like for them to understand the faith that they proclaim, right? And so if our teenagers are showing up to church every Sunday, God willing, they're reciting the creed with everybody, I think it's important for them to understand what it is that they're confessing, right? What it is that they're saying in the creed. And so that's another really important part. And that education is hard to come by, because it needs to be consistent, and it's really something like excuse me, something like that really deserves full-time attention, right? So yeah. And then the third aspect, I think on my end, is just being a glorified planner, which is the way that Father Phil put it. Essentially, just making sure that I have things planned, and I have a schedule, and communicating that schedule, so that we have routine, so that the teenagers are confident and feel comfortable, and also their parents are confident and comfortable in what we're doing. And so, teen group is really something that can be a foundation for them. They can something that they can have confidence in. Um, yeah, and that takes planning.
I want to draw a comparison because we're talking about paid youth workers, and most churches have either a volunteer youth worker or they're looking for a volunteer. And I have a feeling that you're not doing this for the money. It's probably you're not driving a Mercedes, a 2019 Tesla Model S.
That's what you thought.
Yeah, we don't do this for the. We don't do ministry for the money. Anybody who got to know Father Phil Rogers, either in the 10 years that he was at Camp St. Thecla before that, or know him now, know how gifted he is in ministry, and especially youth ministry. And one of the things that he brought to the table at Camp St. Thecla, from my perspective, and I'm quite confident I wasn't the only one but he brought a sense of holiness to Camp St. Thecla that was extremely important. And he got paid, he gets paid to do what he does. Our priests get paid to do what they do. And that does not diminish or lower the value of the holiness they're trying to bring into this. If you have a paid youth worker, they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because of how much they love your children. It's not that the volunteers don't love your children, but it does multiple things. One is our time is precious. And we have an exchange of, usually with most youth workers I know of, they say, look, I'll agree to take a lower amount of money than I'm worth to work with your kids because of how much I love working with kids. That's typically what's happening. I have a feeling you could go out and make a lot more money in the secular market. I could make a lot more money in the secular market. That's not why I'm doing this. So I want to point that out, that every youth worker I've sat down and talked to at a church, they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the ministry. They're doing it because it sends a message to those youth of how important they are, how much we love them. That we finance this position because we want them taken care of, we want them included, we want them to have a community, we want them to learn about their faith, and we want someone that we can point to that says, I'm willing to be responsible for that. And that's basically what a paid youth worker is stepping up and saying is, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of their lives in an extra special way that is very difficult from a volunteer position. I want to put in that extra time. I want to put in the extra hours, the extra effort, the extra trips. I want to go out at 4 p.m. All of those things, that's almost impossible to do as a volunteer because there's so many different things in life pulling you away. This is why we hire a priest, because how else are we going to ask a priest for free to go to the funerals and the baptisms and the weddings and the midweek services and the midweek confessions? And it's, and I don't know a priest who gets paid what he's worth, because he doesn't do it for the money. And so I just wanted to draw that comparison before we go into closure of, if you've been on the fence or you've been against the idea of having to pay if you think everybody should volunteer or we should find a volunteer for that position, there is so much data now that's growing both within the Orthodox Church and in American Christianity about the difference that a paid youth worker makes. And to clarify, we're not talking about like just a big club where they hang out and do. I know you said you're organizing fun activities, but I know that you put a lot of effort into edifying them. Like you talked about, you want them to know their faith. You want them to have a sense of community. That takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of intentional sacrifice on your part. I know it takes sacrifice on your wife's part, because you're probably out some evenings when you could be home with her. So there's a family sacrifice that comes into this. So I just wanted to draw that delineation and show how the paid youth worker has the ability to go the extra mile, the extra effort that the volunteer most times just isn't even capable of because of all the different life responsibilities they already have on themselves. I want to close out now, and I kind of want you to close out with whatever you think, whatever parting words you might have for a church or a priest, or a parish council or parents that haven't thought about this or they've been on the fence about it. What can you say, either a story or parting words on taking a serious look at this and understanding how important it is for our youth?
Absolutely, yeah. I think everything that you said is spot on, to be honest. And I think kind of reiterating your point. I mean, very just practically, volunteers for the most part probably don't have the time to give a youth ministry what it truly deserves, right? Which I think is your point, and I absolutely agree with that because you know I think for the first few months of trying to figure out kind of how this job was going to look and making my schedule and all these things, I thought there's not a lot to it, right? But as we get into it, as I'm building relationships with these teens, and as we're trying to do various things, like for example, next summer we're hoping to go to Project Mexico, and so we're doing a lot of fundraising, and all that fundraising takes a lot of planning, right? And so just practically, the time commitment is a lot. It really is a lot. And on top of that, being able to communicate with my teens during the week, having them, having a space available to them to come during the week, whether it's during the summer if they have a day off or something, to grab coffee, to get lunch, whatever. Just having that time available is super important, I think. Um, and you're right. Even though I make six figures here, uh, it's not about the money. Obviously, I'm kidding. Um, no, you're definitely right. It's not about the money at all. It's about the community. It's about that communal living, right? Embodying the Christian life through our parish community. And I think, in the early church, I mean, thank God it was kind of a blessing that they were all living together and sharing everything that they had together and living that communal lifestyle. So there wasn't really, there wasn't necessarily a need for paid positions, you know. But obviously, living in a very different time, a very different society where money is an important thing to live off of. You know, I think it's hard to get volunteers to commit to, you know, giving this ministry in particular what it really deserves without having a full-time position available. Um, yeah. And I think, you know, for us, and this says nothing about me, but it says everything about the ministry itself that has been in place that I kind of just was assumed into when we got here. That our teens really look forward to meeting every Tuesday. They really look forward to our events. We really have an incredible group of teenagers. Our parents are always excited and very encouraging, you know, and thankful, honestly, just thankful to Father and thankful to myself that we're planning these things and providing their teenagers with an opportunity, for fellowship, an outlet for them to be Orthodox Christians with other Orthodox Christians their age, and to really just kind of develop those relationships with one another. That's been really vital for a lot of our teenagers. I get emails from parents, you know, weekly, just saying thank you. You know, so and so really enjoyed this event that we did. So and so really enjoyed what was discussed the other night. You know, again, that's not me. It's that we have a ministry in place, and it's all about the teenagers and what they need, and we're doing what we can to cater to them. And it seems like that's a huge benefit. You know.
Well, I think that's about it. Our time's up. Are you? I'm gonna go on a limb here. Are you available if someone wants you or Father Phil, if they're considering this, they want to ask questions, they don't know where to get started, how to find someone that's qualified, you know, the difference between part-time and full-time, and that's okay too. As far as I remember with Father Evan Armitage, they started with a part-time youth worker. They might still be on a part-time youth worker, and that's okay. But you know, it's still a paid position.
Right.
So if it's all right, I'd love to put your email address in the comments when we're done, or some kind of a contact option, maybe the church phone number. And that way they can contact the church and get some information if they're interested. This is trending up. If you're not paying attention to youth ministry in the American Orthodox Church, paid youth workers is trending up, and it's paying off. We're reaping so many more rewards than what we're putting in financially. That's once again proof that it's not about the money, because it's a ministry, and it's important ministry. It's important in today's society that we're imparting our faith to our children every possible way that we can, so that we don't have any regrets. And that a youth worker is not replacing the job of the parent, but they're able to come alongside and support in a way that's very difficult from a volunteer position. So I just want to emphasize that over and over, how it's not impossible for a volunteer to do it. It's just so much less likely and so much harder for it to happen. And that it's that youth worker is able to really dedicate specific time when they're paid for it, and know that they're being rewarded in heaven more so than in their bank account for what they're doing, and being rewarded in their hearts, because it takes time to develop relationships with these youth, and it's worth it. It's always worth it. So I thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And
Thank you very much for having me.
and if it's and so you can give me whatever contact information you want when we're done. I'll put it in the
For sure.
comment section. I don't see any questions, so that's okay. But I will, as soon as we're done here, I'll post contact information for Drew in the comment section. So
Yeah.
I'm glad, huh?
I was just gonna say, please let me know if anybody's actually thinking about starting or building a position for a paid youth director. I have a number of guys who I can recommend. So
Oh, that's awesome.
definitely let me know. Yeah. For
Oh,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I agree with you. I think there are several qualified individuals available right
Absolutely. Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And when I say qualified, I mean it. They're qualified in their heart. They're qualified in their background.
Yeah.
So
Who
we want to put
also
them to
need
work.
that ministerial experience.
Yes,
You
they
know,
need to go to
themselves.
work, and
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
they do. So, all right, I want to let everybody know that Drew did me a big favor. I moved last weekend, and all of a sudden I woke up this morning and realized I didn't have a guest, because I've been consumed with packing, moving, unpacking. And so I texted Drew and I was like, Drew, I need a big favor. And he said, yeah, I'll cover it, but it's gonna cost that 6 figures. So it's
at least lunch.
At least lunch minimum. So I look forward to next time I see you. Hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Absolutely.
You're 3 hours away, but it's far when, it's not easy for me to drive over and say hi.
Sure.
So, all right. We'll talk again soon. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you next
Thanks,
week.
Adam. Thank you.